You are listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I'm Kyle Bryant.
And I'm Sean Baumstark. Together, we're navigating life with disability.
Sean and I were both diagnosed with a rare, debilitating, life-shortening disease that has affected our physical abilities and causes us to live with urgency. We are constantly looking for the next challenge, not only in spite of our disease, but because of it.
We are two dudes who constantly challenge our own abilities, and we invite you to do the same. Did you write it all?
No, I didn't write.
My gosh.
I've been so lazy lately. My alarm went off and I laid in bed for half an hour and looked amazing. At my email and went on Twitter and stuff.
Nice. I'm proud of you.
And tried to think of all the stuff I had to do today. So, and then I went to the store and got some stuff for lunch and something for dinner too. So that's exciting. I don't have to go back to the store today. So it's good.
That's good. Are you a go to the store every day kind of a guy?
I try not to be, but unfortunately that's what ends up happening. A lot of times, I'll get done with work and be like, I just want to go home. And so I'll stop by the store real quick and just grab one thing to try to be fast about it.
So when you say store, you mean grocery store, not a drive-through fast food.
Right.
I just want to clarify. I went to the store and got one Big Mac. Come on, what does that mean?
No, I tried to get actual food,
Nice.
Mostly fruits and vegetables and stuff. So, if we're going to, go down the nutrition road, a couple years ago, I did the paleo diet for 3 months, super strict, and I felt really awesome. But just like any diet, it's just hard to follow, especially traveling and, traveling and getting so hungry that it's okay, I'll eat anything. I don't care what it is, and, but I think paleo kind of informs my food choices. And even if those choices are terrible sometimes, I know I have something to compare it to know why it's terrible, So, anyway, that's sort of my general philosophy on the way I eat.
I did a clinical trial about this time last year is when I started, and it required a very strict diet. So for the beginning parts of 2016, I was great. I was on a roll. I was eating really healthy, cooking almost everything at home, and feeling great, and I felt like I was looking better. And then, of course, the summer hit, and that diet was no longer required. So now I am so far off the wagon, I can't even see where I came from. But, what's that matter? It's no big deal. You only live once, right? YOLO.
Well, that's a good point, but at the same time, I don't think it's worth it to really beat ourselves up.
Sure.
But I do think it's worth it to strive for something concrete and something we know is going to make us feel better, such as a consistent diet,
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast, where Kyle and Sean talk about ways to eat healthier or ways to not, whatever you want to do. What were we going to say, Kyle? You want to just talk about stuff?
Yeah, I want to talk about stuff that for the podcast, you know,
right.
like that people that we like wrote down and planned to talk about and stuff.
All right, fair enough. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I'm Sean Baumstark. We have Kyle Bryant. I can't really say in studio with me, but I guess, I mean, in a sense, we kind of are.
Yeah. We're in two different studios. You know, it's kind of like a brother from another mother or something, right? Is that
sure? Yeah, I mean, that's cool. As Kyle was saying, what we wrote down in our plan for today is really talking about how to create or how to find and live with a healthy identity. What we've talked about so far is living with Friedreich's ataxia, and Kyle and I had a little bit of a different experience when we were first diagnosed, and we both began to wrestle with what this means for life in different ways. So today we thought we'd just share a little bit about how different ways to kind of conquer the initial shock and reality check of accepting or realizing that life's going to be challenging and different than maybe what you've always thought or dreamed of.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like you said, our experiences were a little bit different, but I think they were very similar in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of aspects of our stories of diagnosis and disease discovery and navigating disability apply not only, you know, to the conversation between me and you, but to the conversation between me, you, and lots of other people dealing with similar situations.
For sure.
And so that's why we're sharing this conversation. So, Sean, tell us about a personal identity. Like, why is it important to even think about your personal identity and how it affects the way you do stuff?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it and different phrases and terms and quotes out there. But one of the things that comes to mind is, I'm sure we've all heard it, you can't really love anybody until you love yourself first. And I believe that does sort of align with having a positive identity or a healthy identity, because if you think you look funny or act funny in a bad way and you know don't have a lot to offer your community or the world, then essentially you're not excited about who you are or what you have to offer, and it's going to be really hard for you to be confident in what you do offer. So for me, part of the reason why I believe it's important and what a healthy identity means to me is getting to a place where you've accepted what you can't change and then find ways to contribute those things to something bigger than yourself, whether it's the rare disease community or your school or church or whatever, you know, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever it is you have an interest in. It's this innate need, I believe, or challenge to commit to something bigger than yourself. I don't know if that totally makes sense or answers your question.
I think it does. You know, and to kind of tie it back to the story of diagnosis that we've been talking about for a couple episodes now. You know, last episode, or maybe it was first episode, I said that, you know, when I was diagnosed, I thought highly of myself, and I didn't want to think less of myself, and that's what scared me about confronting FA, you know, and just seeing the future and realizing that it was going to be different, and what I thought it was going to be worse. Like, different to me was bad.
Sure.
And because I had this picture, and anything other than that was bad. And so I think it's important for us to realize that, all of us have a vision of the future, and it's so strong. Like, you can touch it almost, right? Like every little detail is all planned out in your head. And then, when you get diagnosed with a disease that says that you're going to be in a wheelchair, you're going to slowly lose all ability to take care of yourself, and you'll likely die a premature death due to heart disease. That obviously changes everything.
True.
And one of the main things that changes, I think, is self-identity, or self-image. And a lot of it for me was how I perceived others seeing me. And I would walk down the street and I would feel wobbly, and I would just think of all the things that people were thinking of me, and that was forming my self-image of the stuff that it was probably how negative it was, probably wasn't even what other people were thinking, but it was in my head, and it turned into my reality. And that's really what scared me and what kept me from confronting this diagnosis for like 2 years before I was able to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel, even today, and, I'm still pretty independent in my mobility, but even at the gym or at work, if I kind of stumble or lose balance, or worse yet, actually fall over, I feel like the entire world is looking at me. And I know that might sound egotistical. I'm not thinking people are looking at me because I'm cool. I feel like everybody's looking at me because I'm a train wreck of a mess, and you can't help but stare at a train wreck, right?
Right. Well, I think, some people think you're a train wreck, and it's not because of FA, Sean. Like, it's because of all the other stuff.
That's a good point. I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you. You're a true friend. But yeah, it's hard to begin to separate what people really perceive of you and what you think they perceive of you. I'm sure we've all had a conversation at least once in our life where we think the conversation goes something like, "Oh, I thought you meant this," or "I thought you were thinking this," and then that other person was like, "What? No, that never even entered my mind. I was just doing it because it needed to be done," or whatever the conversation is. We've all kind of, I'm sure, had at least one conversation like that, and it's no different when you're dealing with a disease or a challenge or a physical disability.
Like I was saying, it was all in my head, and it was only when I opened up and started talking about my disease and with other people, and not necessarily even talking about like, "Oh, how do you feel about it?" but just talking objectively about, oh my gosh, one day I think I'm going to need a wheelchair, and, maybe I should buy a different car because of, the challenges that I'm having right now, and just objective things like that. I think that really opened the door for me to start and getting feedback from other people, even not directly talking about specifically how do you think when I'm walking down the street. It started to help me understand their thinking about my situation. And it helped me to understand that people aren't looking at me like I'm an idiot. They're looking at me like, you know what? I want to help. Like, is there something I can do to help? And everyone wants to help. That's what I've realized. And it's up to me. It's up to you. It's up to all of us to allow them to help in the way that they can.
I certainly don't mean to derail the conversation, but I think you're wrong, Kyle. I think I think if we just look back an episode or two, not everyone wants to help. I don't know if you remember that cab driver, but he had no interest in helping you whatsoever.
That's actually a good point. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah.
But no, I think overall you're right. For the most part, people want to help. They want to hold the door open for you, or they want to lift that heavy thing for you. In fact, I was just on a flight yesterday, and there was an older gentleman trying to get a suitcase overhead, and some random other passenger, not a flight attendant, was there and not buckled in yet, and she was like, "Oh, let me help." She stood up and helped him lift the suitcase up, and I was like, that's such... I think that's good nature. That's innate, our human nature, to just help somebody, and unfortunately, somebody like your cab driver has just had a rough life.
Yeah. There are exceptions to the rule, but I think that by and large, the people that we come in contact with really want to do good, especially our friends and family, obviously. And I do think that I think this is a huge topic for me, like asking for help, and how I see myself when I actually accept help, because partly I think that it makes me feel more disabled sometimes.
Sure.
To accept help, because it makes me confront the fact that, I really can't do this. And you know what? Even if I struggle to get it done, I'll get it done. And then all of a sudden I did it like that. Like, I only can't do it if I don't. Right. And no matter what it takes. So I feel like, there's a balance there between being able to do stuff and realizing where the line is, I guess.
I would agree. I think certainly over the last probably year or so, I've gotten to a point where I ask for more help, or I rely on help. It used to be where somebody would see me struggle, or trying to move something heavy, and they would, let me help, and I'd be like, no, it's fine, I got it. It might take me 10 minutes longer than anybody else to walk up that flight of stairs, but I can do it. And I've realized over the last several months that when somebody sees that or offers, I lean on them. I let them. I probably don't go looking or asking for help,
right,
as much as maybe I should, just to remain safe. But if it's offered, I'm definitely a little more comfortable today accepting that help, realizing, I think a lot of it is realizing too, people out there, they just want to help. They don't pity you necessarily all the time.
Yeah.
They just know it's a challenge, and if they have the ability to help, why not?
Yeah, I agree. But I really do think that this issue of like asking for help and accepting help, it really plays into the self-image conversation and self-identity, because I do think it takes a healthy self-image to be able to accept help in a gracious way,
True.
So, Sean, can you expand on why else is a healthy identity important?
Yeah, I think one of the things that came to mind when contemplating this topic is what I began to do in the face of the diagnosis. Of course, it throws you for a loop, no matter what you're doing in life. It's a different reality than you ever imagined possible. And one of the things I did right away is I just started, I talked to a few very close friends, and we spent a couple days on different times, but we just went for little day hikes, to be out in nature and to take deep breaths and just kind of wrap our minds around what it is I'm up against. And it was on the course of one of these hikes that an idea for the nonprofit that I've helped establish, and kind of this idea of committing yourself to causes bigger than yourself is really where it began to hit for me. Is we began to get feedback that other people are inspired because I've been told I am going to be in a wheelchair and I shouldn't hike and I should stick to swimming only for my exercise. And I said, screw all that for now. I'm going to do everything I can while I can. And in doing so, I discovered that just stepping forward a little bit and taking that risk really empowers me. It empowered me and empowered a lot of people around me. So for me, part of the deal is realizing that when I'm looking at things or when I'm considering the stuff in life I can do and realizing how much I can still do in spite of the disease, it's very empowering for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It helps you move forward when you realize your own power and your own self-worth, right?
True. It can be so devastating and crippling, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. When you first realize that you're dealing with something this devastating, it can knock you out and put you in your seat for a really long time. And I'm sure we all know somebody who kind of was overcome by, whether not overcome, but kind of ruled by depression or this woe is me sort of mentality. And I believe when we're able to look a little bit beyond that and start building a healthier identity, that's what empowers you to actually get out and get things done and essentially live beyond your condition.
Right. Yeah. I think that's important. That was one of the principles, right, of this entire the concept of this podcast was living beyond your circumstances and reaching for a little bit more always. And so I also think one of the other reasons why a healthy self-identity, self-image is important in moving forward is that it allows you to be a part of the community. And it when you realize your contribution, it only makes you want to contribute more. In stuff like clinical trials and fundraisers and just speaking to others, maybe reaching out to others in the community who are having a tough time. Sure. And, all of that builds and sort of resonates off of all the other activity, right? And it sort of amplifies each other as everyone gets active and goes and realizes their contribution to the community.
Yeah, and those contributions can be, really big, really small. There isn't a scale of big and small. It's effectiveness. And somebody's, your bike ride can be just as effective as somebody else's bake sale or whatever it is they're able to do. And in fact, with that line of thinking, I remember your story and how it took you 2 years to even talk about it. But as soon as you started to talk about it and work through your self-identity and your own self-worth, you began to take action and contribute on today what's become a pretty big scale. So I agree. I think it's a really big part of building that confidence in your own identity and self-worth, saying, okay, yeah, this little bit may be true, but what can I do in spite of that little bit of disability or that little bit of challenge or that little bit of whatever it may be? What can I do beyond those things?
Yeah, and I think in contributions to the community, I see it as a puzzle. I've heard this so many times from different people And I use this metaphor a lot, but the treatment, the cure for FA, for any other disease, it's a puzzle, and we all hold a piece, right? And so, no matter how big or small your piece is, or how big or small you perceive your piece to be, every piece is important, and every piece helps complete the puzzle. And I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point. Everybody plays a part to some extent or another.
So, Sean, we've established sort of what a healthy identity is, what a self-image is, and why it's important. So, if there is a prescription, what are some of those things that we can do to, or maybe even just think about to help improve our self-image?
Sure. I spend a little bit of time online and watching different TED videos, and, I enjoy reading a lot of different, I don't want to say self-help, but development type books. And one of the things that I think about when preparing for this conversation is this idea that a healthy state of mind or identity is necessary in order to rule our disability or rule our challenge instead of it ruling you. So sort of a mantra of sorts, in not an exact quote, but I want to rule my life, and that includes my disability. I don't want it to rule what I do. In fact, I had a friend, I was talking over text, and I was out of town, and he was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just going to relax in my hotel." And he's like, "Why don't you get out and go walk around and go check out the city?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's hard for me to walk." And he put me in check. He's like, "Hard for you to walk? Since when has that ruled anything you do?" And I'm like, "You're absolutely right. I'm going for a walk." And so I walked to Starbucks. Anyway, for me...
How far was that, Sean?
Don't worry about it, okay? It doesn't matter. It's not the point of the story, Kyle. It was 3 blocks. But anyway... For me, getting to the point where you rule your life, including your disability, there are a few things you have to actively do and kind of put yourself in check. And some of the little pieces that I've picked up along the way are finding ways to avoid getting stuck in the negative. I heard a TED Talk from a lady named Allison Ledgerwood. She actually gave a presentation right here at UC Davis, not too far from where I live. And she talked about some research that came out of UC Davis that suggests that practicing gratitude every day increases positive thinking. And the reason why that's necessary is she and a bunch of other psychologists have said that innately, we are wired as humans to focus on the negative. That's kind of where our mind tends to go. That's the natural path that we take. And so in order to kind of correct course that, we have to practice being thankful, practice our gratitude every day in order to improve positive thinking. So for me, with that, I never spend my days thinking about the stairs I can't climb, or the drinks I can't carry across the room, or the things I can't do. Instead, I focus on the things I can do, and I express gratitude in different ways beyond that. So I don't know if I'm touching on your question, but I think one of the big things we have to do every single day, or at least on a regular basis, is think about the good things in life and to be thankful for those things, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 3 million things. Expressing and feeling that sort of gratitude will increasingly over time improve or increase our positive thinking, which is, I think, probably step 1 for having a healthier identity. If you focus on the negative all the time, how are you gonna love yourself? How are you gonna get over the garbage that you had to put up with simply because of a disease or a challenge?
Yeah. I was actually listening to the TED Radio Hour this morning, and there was a guy that was on there talking about depression and his battle with depression, and he's written a bunch of books, and it was a really, really cool talk. But, he talked about specifically when he's feeling terrible about his writing and thinking that he's a terrible writer, he'll go back and read something that he's written that he really likes. And that will help disrupt the thought of the negative thought, right, that you're talking about, and it'll help him focus on the positive and say, oh, I really am a decent writer. I actually kind of like what I wrote before. Maybe I can do that again. And I think that's a really good example of focusing on the positive.
I think too, taking that sort of action is a really good first step. If as soon as he starts thinking I'm a terrible writer, he knows where that probably could take him if he focuses on that and stays on that for too long. So instead, he probably, of course, I don't know him, but I'm willing to bet as soon as he starts thinking, shoot, I'm terrible at this, he probably takes that step to look back at things he likes pretty quickly. Otherwise, the next thing you know, you've been sitting in this lake of depression for weeks and weeks and weeks, if not longer, and it's really hard to come out of those things. So I believe that's an important point to make and a good thing to consider. When you start feeling yourself being overridden with self-loathing or whatever it may be, you have those one or two things you do on a regular basis to help yourself not fall too far down that hole, whether it's calling a friend or reading something you wrote that you like, or watching a TED video, or listening to our podcast, or whatever it is your favorite podcast may be. It's actually taking action. It's not letting those things rule you or rule the steps you take to overcome.
Right. And another thought I had with what you said was, it's about not letting our disease rule our lives. And on this podcast, obviously, it's called Two Disabled Dudes. That's the specific challenge that we talk about a lot. But I think that relates to every challenge we have in our life, whether it relates to our disease or not. There's other challenges, obviously, that you and I face all the time, right?
Sure.
And there's multiple challenges that everyone faces every day in our lives. So I think it's important to keep it in perspective, especially when we're talking specifically about our disability. A lot of times, it's not just that, and not letting something rule your life. And that it's you, like there's all these factors, but then there's a person, and seeing that and realizing that beyond all these other factors that contribute to what you think is you sometimes, or what you perceive is you sometimes, is your disease or your circumstances, or all this negative stuff that could be. But then when you look past that and just see it all objectively as factors that are in your life, and it's not who you are, maybe that thought is a little too far-reaching. But I think it's important to kind of keep it in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. Another thought that I had on this particular topic, again, watching another TEDx, this guy named Sean Stevenson, he said something in his presentation that really stuck out to me, and I've heard it before in different iterations and different walks of life, but the way he put it is, never believe predictions that do not empower you. And I think think that was so incredible and loved it so much that I wrote it down, because it's true. If everybody around you is saying you suck, then of course you're going to get to a point where you believe that. So he's kind of arguing that unless it's something that empowers you and helps you move forward, whichever way forward is for you, don't believe it. Don't succumb to it. Don't subscribe to the thought process or predictions or things that aren't going to make you better. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on that, but I really like that one little line he said. Yeah, we're gonna make mistakes. There will be challenges, whether it's disease related or not. But don't let the predictions of those things cause you to give up your ruling of life, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's all about like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you believe those things, they really are going to come true, the negative things. So, I think that's really true. I like it.
You know, it kind of reminds me of the story you shared not so long ago about Christopher Reeves.
Yeah.
You know, and after his accident, a paraplegic could barely move his finger. Actually, for a long time, couldn't move a finger. And he still accomplished so much in the time after the accident. He could have easily been like, I'm done. I guess I'm just going to sit here and wait. And probably nobody would have blamed him. Everybody, you know, he's paraplegic. It's fine.
Right.
Go ahead and relax for a little bit. But he said, no, that's not who I am. I'm bigger than this. I'm better than this. And I can still do some things. And to me, that's very empowering and encouraging, especially when you look at his story.
Yeah, and, you know, that brings up the fact that you are not your circumstance. Like, you know, Christopher Reeve, physically, after his accident, he was a shell of the body that he was before. But that is not who he is. He is not his body. And I think that was something he probably realized. Well, yeah, I mean, shoot, his book is called Still Me. And so, you know, he realized that I am still me no matter what my body looks like or feels like. And I'm going to use my personality and the way I affect other people and use that to my advantage and do good work with it.
That's true. Really good point. I think it probably, unless you spark some other interest or, spark some other thought, probably one of the things I have just to wrap up my end of the conversation. This gentleman I listened to on TEDx, Sean Stevenson, he also said, you are not your condition. And I believe that so much. And I believe that from the day I was diagnosed and even watching my dad fight cancer and all the different people I've met over the years fighting disability, whether it's Friedreich's ataxia or something else, we really are not our disease. We're not our condition. We aren't defined by those things. Sure, they're a part of life, but that doesn't mean I still can't contribute something on a greater level. So, I'm thankful for this conversation, that mentality, because it reminds me that even though I struggle with stairs or struggle to run, in fact, I can't really run now, and I'm in the middle of transitioning probably from an upright bike to either not riding or some other style of bike. And I don't have to be defined by those things. My condition isn't Sean.
All right.
So for whatever that's worth, that's kind of where I land.
my overall thought for this conversation, especially when considering FA and diagnosis and vision for the future that is completely different, and a vision that gets totally crushed when you get diagnosed. I think that it relates to every situation. We all have this vivid vision of what our life should be, and it's worth realizing that life is going to be different than you imagined. I think that almost anyone can say that. And it's not going to be worse. It's just going to be different. There is no right way to proceed through life. There's no path. We're all just blazing a trail, right? There is no determined. Nothing is given. Nothing is determined day to day, and we're all just kind of figuring it out as we go. When I was young, I thought my parents, and maybe a lot of us think this, I thought my parents knew everything there was to know, and they would make everything okay, and they did for, by and large. I had a really great childhood, but the older I get, the more I realize, because, I have a healthy exchange between me and my parents, and we have more of a friendship now. But I realized that, they're just figuring it out as they go, too.
Sure.
And we're all just figuring it out as we go. And so I don't think a vision of the future is a bad thing. I just think you have to realize that it's not going to be 100% accurate, and you've got to be prepared for that fact.
That's a really good point. I love the way you put that. In fact, having a vision for the future is probably a really good thing, and a lot of people would tell you you've got to have some sort of vision to know where you want to go and what you want to do and who you want to become. But realizing that vision might need some adjustments and alterations along the way is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be prepared be flexible and allow room for a different approach or for a different way on that trail that you're blazing. So I really like that, and I'm glad you said that, Kyle.
Yeah, and I think that principle specifically relates to a progressive disease, like FA, because we're constantly losing abilities. I'm much less physically able than I was when I was 17 when I was diagnosed, and I have to be prepared for the fact that a lot of things are going to continue changing, and you have to be prepared for the fact that a lot of things are going to be changing throughout your life. And I think that applies to a lot of situations, not just a rare disease, but, a lot of just changes that happen in life, and things happen,
True. All right. Well, cool. I like that one. Thank you for the conversation. And, of course, thank you to our listeners for tuning in to episode 002.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Sean. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. To find this episode and links to some of the stuff we talked about today, find us online at twodisableddudes.com or subscribe on iTunes.
We'd like to hear from you and feature your feedback and questions on future podcasts. Be sure to visit us at twodisableddudes.com to find our contact info and connect on social media.
Special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins, who also composed the music.
We'll share a new podcast every other week. We hope you'll listen and share it with a friend. Until next time, keep living with urgency.